You ready to win your waiver wire this week?
Yes.
All right, then we got more guys for you to add. We've got plenty of options at quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end. To start with, we're going to talk about some quarterbacks that put up a ton of points this week, one of which, Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. Rick, look at the low ownership. How do you feel about him as a quarterback in Superflex and 1QB throughout the rest of the season?
He's still not a guy that I want to rely on week to week, but I think actually all three of these guys, especially the first two we're going to talk about, are great streaming options depending on the matchup. They aren't guys that we want to put in tough matchups. These guys are at the level where matchup does matter. So I like him. He's getting some rushing in there. He's passing fine. He's not turning the ball over, and he's got two good wide receivers. So I think that if you're looking for a streaming quarterback, you could do worse than Geno Smith.
He's a good option. I think he's definitely gives you more rushing upside than the next guy, Jared Goff from the Detroit Lions. Even without most of his top weapons, still put up 4 touchdowns this weekend and balled out against a suspect Seattle defense. What else is there to say about Goff that hasn't already been said about Geno?
Hey, here's the thing, right? And for both of these quarterbacks we've talked about so far, they're going to trail. Or they're going to just have to continue scoring because they're not going to stop people, right? So even if they have the lead, they have to keep the foot on the gas pedal. These guys are going to put up points, garbage time points, or going back and forth points. Like today, that was one of the craziest scoring games we've seen in a while. And if they're facing Buffalo or San Francisco or Green Bay, you're probably not going to want to start them. But if you get matchups where they're playing Atlanta or Seattle or Detroit or like that, then they're good.
All right. So one guy that could wind up being a starter the rest of the season for you, Zach Wilson from the New York Jets. Came back, returned this week, caught a touchdown, threw a touchdown, looked a lot better, and has really good weapons. So what say you about Zach Wilson?
I've always liked Zach Wilson a lot. He was my number 2 quarterback in last year's draft, Trevor Lawrence and then Zach Wilson. They went out and they got him weapons, right? Corey Davis and him have had a good connection going back to last year, and we saw that more today, but he's got Garrett Wilson. He's got Elijah Moore. He's got Conklin at tight end now. They've got Breece Hall and Michael Carter out of the backfield can both catch the ball. So he's got everything he needs to be successful. I thought this was a pretty good game. He was only 50% in completion percentage, but it was his first game, right? He's getting back into it, just a second-year quarterback. But he's a guy where the Jets can give up some points, so he can be in that same situation as Geno and Jared. But he's got, I think, the best weapons out of all of them. Like when you look from just running back all the way through, they all actually have some pretty good weapons, but they're going to be able to put up some points, I think. And as they grow together, it's throughout the season, I think it just gets better. And he's got 3 ways he can score. He can rush the ball. That's the one thing that he's got that Geno's got, right? Jared Goff doesn't have a lot of that. So he can run the ball. Apparently he can catch the ball and he can throw some too. So he's got 3 different ways he can score touchdowns.
And if he does it all to himself, even better, right?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So next up, we got Zay Jones, wide receiver from the Jaguars. This is a guy that we mentioned last week. We told you to get him, and we did see some increased percentages. So great job to you that did add him. Rick, what else is there to say that we didn't say last week?
There's not a lot to add, right? Because he didn't play this week. So since he sat out, people are probably going to look to drop him. And it showed in this offense that he's going to be a reliable target for them. They struggled. They got up 14-0 early, and then they struggled against Philly. But Zay Jones is going to be a big part of that offense. We throw him back on here this week.
Okay, next up, Zach Wilson's tight end, Tyler Conklin. This is a guy that you've been hearing some of the folks here talk about over time, and see roster ownership still fairly low. If you get a tight end, this guy continues to get targeted. Even though Zach Wilson's back, he still is targeting him. What do you think about Conklin, and how do you feel about him as a kind of a back-end playable tight end each week?
He's just a safe play right now at tight end. A lot of tight ends are getting like 1-2 points every week. I look at Kyle Pitts and how he 4 points, 3 points, has one big week and then back to 4 points. And it's tough out there for tight ends right now. And Conklin keeps getting 8, 10, 12 points every week. So while he doesn't have the 25-point upside, probably, at least if you grab him and you are desperate for a tight end, you're probably not going to get 0. And that's sometimes just what you need out of your tight end spot.
For sure. On to a player who looked real good in relief of Cordero Patterson, Tyler Allgier from the running back from the Falcons. Allgier looked really good this week in the opportunities he got. Definitely better than Caleb Huntley, a guy that you can see is owned pretty small amounts, minus sleeper, which is obviously dynasty included. What do you think about Allgier? And do you think Patterson's going to be kind of pitch count each week to keep him healthy?
I don't think so. I think once Patterson gets healthy, he's still going to have a large portion of this backfield, but is he going to be able to get healthy? And Tyler Allgier was somebody that I stashed and drafted in best ball and everything all off season. He was like my AJ Dillon of this draft class, where he was a big guy, productive in college, but people just didn't seem to like him for whatever reason. And he hadn't done a whole lot until this week, but I think if Patterson's going to miss time, Allgier's the guy to grab there in Atlanta. Plus, they're probably going to at some point look to their younger players to see what they've got for next year. I think down the stretch, he could definitely get some more looks.
And another guy coming back from injury, we've been hearing about it, Brian Robinson, running back from the Commanders. You heard this week that he should be activated next week and come back. This is a guy that we're telling you to preemptively grab and stash, because going into the season, Washington was talking all big and bad about it, that this guy was going to be their next starting running back, and
he won the job.
And he won the job before the tragic accident happened. So, Rick, what's there to add about Robinson?
You want to get him before everybody starts thinking about him, right? Probably last week would have been a great time. It's just hard to gauge when he's going to come back. He might be activated this week, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play. That doesn't mean he's going to get touches if he is active, but it's nice to just see him coming back after being shot. It's a good sign. I fully expect him to end up taking a bulk of the rushing work, and he had earned that. He had relegated Antonio Gibson to returning kicks. And then that happened right after it was announced that he was going to be the starting running back. It's just nice to see him back, and I'm rooting for the kid, so I hope that he breaks out.
Next up, Isaiah McKenzie, wide receiver from Buffalo. This is a guy that you've mentioned before, slot receiver in the Buffalo offense. We know how much you love that, so tell us why we need to grab him now.
I said it last week, right? Like, the slot receiver in a Josh Allen offense averages 7 targets per game. He came in with 6 today, but he got a tutty. He had 6 targets. Stephon Diggs had 6 targets. I said it on this morning's show. I think people are sleeping on Isaiah McKenzie because they like Gabe Davis so much. And I think McKenzie is going to be the more reliable target, guy that gets the most targets out of those two. I do think he is the wide receiver 2 in Buffalo. So, wasn't big numbers this week. He is showing that he is going to be targeted in this offense, and we know he's got 20-point upside.
Next up is quickly becoming Aaron Rodgers' favorite target in the passing game for the Packers, Romeo Doubs. You can see Yahoo and Sleeper, it's getting pretty high, but you need to have this guy on your roster. He's getting targeted every week, and he's getting more consistently targeted. So it's definitely one of those that you want to pick up, have on your roster. See this week, 8 for 5, caught 5 of them, 47 and touchdowns. What have you seen that you like about Doubs, and what makes you think he might be a good ad?
It's just the usage. It's the fact that he's jumped the earlier pick in Christian Watson in usage, and there's touchdown upside there. We know with Aaron Rodgers' offense that you're going to have chances for touchdowns. He's getting those 5 receptions a week, 50 to 75 yards, and 1 to 2 touchdowns. Like, he's got multi-touchdown upside as well.
Next up, Corey Davis. We're talking about another Jets player. This is the guy that should be on more rosters. It's really surprising ESPN and Yahoo doesn't have a higher ownership. He just produces. He's maybe not the most intriguing player, but this guy produces, gets targets, catches them, makes that magic happen. Rick, what do you think about Corey Davis?
The numbers surprised me. You said 6.9% on ESPN. I thought you meant 69%, and then 25% on Yahoo. I mean, come on, people. What are we doing here? Corey Davis had a great connection with Zach Wilson last year. He was putting up good numbers. This year, we've seen it with Flacco, and now we've seen it with Zach Wilson. He's had 13 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games. He's put up at least 74 yards in 3 of the 4 games. And I think he's been the leader in targets 3 out of the 4 games. So Corey Davis is right now the most reliable and the wide receiver 1 in New York for the Jets. And the roster numbers are just way too low. He's going to be a guy that you can start in the flex every week.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Also, what was crazy is Michael Gallup came back, got you a touchdown in his return action. I really thought they'd ease him back in, and they did, but he produced, and that's huge. And then looking at his roster ownership across the platforms, I was surprised that he was less than 50% in 2 of the 3. This is a guy that you need to own. I know that it's not Dak under center, but he can still produce. Cooper Rush can still run this offense and still make CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, these guys be fantasy relevant. Gallup, what's your thoughts on him?
He was one of my underappreciated players in a write-up I did earlier this year, and that was for dynasty dynasty specifically, but I just thought if he's only going to miss 3 or 4 games, getting Michael Gallup on your roster early was big. So now that he's back, obviously he didn't get huge usage this week, but that's understood for just coming back. And then we know he's going to be a threat in the red zone. Lamb takes a lot of pressure off. Lamb has stepped up the past 2 weeks, which is going to help Michael Gallup. Definitely needs to be rostered in every league.
And another guy that needs to be, he's quickly becoming one of the most exciting fantasy wide receivers to watch, George Pickens. And this guy's been producing really well as a rookie with the quarterback play that they've had in Pittsburgh, which is kind of up and down so far this year. Definitely a guy that needs to be on your rosters and is quickly pushing for flex consideration. Rick, what do you think about Pickens?
Yeah, I think if Pickett is the quarterback, then Pickens is a startable asset, right? If we find out that Trubisky is going to start again next week, because while Pickett did put up some numbers, he also did throw 3 interceptions in his first game. So who knows who's going to start next week, but Pickett is better for Pickens. The skills unquestioned, right? He's looking great, and I think he could end up having some of the best numbers out of the rookie wide receivers at the end of the year if Pickett does start most of the rest of the season.
Those are the people you need to roster. If you have questions, rotoheat.com will